Hi, everyone. So I'm, like Alex was saying, Raluca. I'm one of the co-founders of the startup called etiq. We've traditionally come from the ML testing space. And now, obviously, we're much more working with coding assistants and agents as well. And my background is in data science, and I've been in the data space for quite a while, maybe longer than I want to admit. But this is probably the most exciting time I've seen, which I feel is the case for a lot of us here. Now, of course, the title of the presentation is meant to be controversial, but the idea is more that, there are elements from coding assistants, there are elements from MLOps world that can be combined in a super interesting kind of novel way, which we feel, would add a lot of value to both. Okay. So Alex already asked the question about the copilots and coding assistants and, people using it. I have kind of a follow-up question, which I'm not expecting many people to answer yes, but I guess has anyone built agents that kind of help you code pipelines or models or scripts or like an MLE agent or anything like that? Probably not. Okay, no worries. At least people use coding assistants a lot. Cool. So now, so just in terms of setting the scene, I guess we're all familiar with the coding assistants, but I think what the primary principle behind them is, they are for developers, they produce code and they use as input code, right? So it's a lot about the code. And I guess us being from the data science, data background, our main kind of elements that we use is data, right? Now, the way data is handled by these copilots at the moment is kind of can roughly be put into 4 buckets. One is the bucket where not much is happening, like they just kind of produce code and that's it. The second is where it's a bit enhanced, as in they have an MCP to DBT, or there's like a quote-unquote AI sandbox somewhere where the coding assistant can do some operations on the data itself. Then there are some task-specific agents, right? So Vincent is a, I think, open source example, but there's quite a few that basically try to emulate what the data scientist is doing or what the data person is doing. And then I think there's a 4th bucket, which is a little bit underserved at the moment, where if you think about it, these first 3 buckets, they all come at it from a code first point of view, right? So they use LLMs, it's all about the code, producing code, like their primary mode of existence is code, and data is like an afterthought. All right, we're going to put an MCP on it or a sandbox to make it more secure. So it's kind of that mindset. The architecture doesn't really prioritize the data. Whereas what we push and what we think would be quite nice to have is an element, a setup where, data is maybe not the primary element, but at least as important as the code itself, because if we are coming from this space, we know that this is kind of what we work with, right? We the code, I would argue, is not that complex. Okay, so, and it's not just about, one or the other, it's about both of them as a mix. Now, I'm gonna just delve a little bit into this and what it means, because again, if we, think about developers, they have a certain task to do, and a coding assistant is great for that. If we think of data scientists, they have a slightly different problem to solve. And I think this next example kind of illustrates this really well. So this is, to be honest, very few lines of code, right? This is the graph of this little code here, right? Like if you look at it, right, this is, I mean, very few inputs, Kaggle type example. So a human, is not really designed to remember, for each different element, you have the data sets here, the functions here, whatever, for each little element, okay, what is the code? What is the data doing? What are the particularities of each? And like all the numerous combinations, right? For a relatively straightforward example, which has, less, 100 lines of code or something like that. So the type of problem is not around coding, right? It's about these numerous combinations that arrive from the artifact and the code logic combined. And this is kind of what a data scientist would struggle to remember. At least in my experience, that's, like if you wrote something yesterday or 6 months ago, or, if someone else wrote it, if you use a copilot or a coding assistant, or even worse, if you use an agent, trying to debug this type of pipeline, this type of script is not very straightforward, especially if you're talking about a pre-production type world where anything goes and you have things hanging and good luck to you type thing. With coding assistants, these issues really do compound. And I guess if you use Claude or stuff like that, you have noticed it can be a bit verbose and produce things that maybe it shouldn't. So this is really the problem, right? So if you look at the type of code and the type of thing output, this is the type of problem. It's not a coding problem. It's a kind of mix of the two. Now, so this, from a technical point of view, we think that can be translated into kind of a few different separate topics. One is, okay, can we link each element of the code, each artifact correctly with each element of the code that produces, so we can have a way to, transverse this graph, like optimize it, et cetera, right? Like if you think about it from point of view of an agent or a coding assistant that is eventually supposed to build this. And secondly, and I think this is where it becomes a bit more subtle, is that do you need, basically, let's say you have an agent or a coding assistant that actually, you task it to log the artifacts and to create the lineage of the code itself. Can you let it do that, or do you need a kind of a real point in the world that exists, and it's kind of something that you can verify separately from your coding agent type setup, right? And to be honest, with the coding assistants, it's pretty clear that you do need it, right? And I don't want to get into those stories about things going wrong, because I think that's quite unfair to the coding assistants, right? Which are doing overall a great job. But I think when you are looking into more complex stories like agents in this space, I think that's where, because they use a lot of different architectures where agents also check your code and so forth, then the question is, do you need it? And this is where we're trying to do some research to prove that, to show, okay, what's actually going on? Do you need this? Do you need something outside the LLM or the coding assistant, or can you just rely on it altogether? So watch that space. But moving forward, I guess, so if we remember right, we're trying to link all these pieces of information together so that, we can optimize it at the end, we can debug it, we can do whatever we want, test it, maybe productionalize it a little bit more easily, right? You can instrument this much, well, not this, but something better than this more easily than maybe you just as is. So then there's the other paradigm where, okay, if one paradigm is coming solely from the code, right? So you use the coding assistant to actually log your artifact, and you just ask it to do it basically in some, more or less sophisticated way. Then the other paradigm is, surprise, surprise, the MLOps world. So we've learned for a while, I feel like maybe in the pre-LLM days, that we should kind of monitor and log our pipelines and our scripts in general, right? But then these tools at the moment, they don't necessarily, and they're great tools, and they're all great tools, but the logging is not really at the code level, right? So these guys are not really looking at the code. You can if you try really hard and you do it manually, but that's kind of where they are at the moment. So, okay, so for us, the question is, okay, so just as a quick recap, because I'm not sure if this is this is, maybe as interesting to you as it is to me as a topic. But we've kind of discussed how, the existing coding assistants and agents at this point in time, right, which the space is moving very, very fast, but they're not super data centric. The problem is a lot more about the combination of the artifacts produced and the code logic that produces than it is just about the code or just about the data. And there are some trust issues as well. And what I guess we're positing is, if you did have, a graph of your code, if you could link all these code snippets with your artifacts, and you could store all these particularities of your code and of your data, would you be able to, I guess, optimize your, initially your lives, your professional lives, and then after that, like an agent, hopefully. So this is where I'm going to share something else. Okay, all right, cool. So this is kind of the playground where we see that this this can be used, and of course this is like we've developed, I guess, the how should I put it, the core, the core of the platform, right? But then what we try to do now is figure out, okay, what are the most interesting use cases for people, right? So what we're showing is, so on this side you have the code, right, which I guess I could, run a live demo, but I am also just, I can do it, right? Let's do it, right? So it's a very straightforward piece of code, and then on the other side, it captures your lineage and it captures your artifacts as well. Right. So let's say I'm a data scientist, and like imagine you in your professional lives, maybe like when this is not like 3 lines and it has a whole entire code base underneath with like a lot of functions that someone else coded for you. So it kind of what our users find it very helpful is just the actual illustration. You can quickly pick up where things get left off. So this is visual representation of your code. You can you can templatize what you want your pipeline to do. You can review it. You can document it. You can use it to document it, and so forth. But also, I guess, and let me give an example where that actually is an issue. You have some other applications, right? So the kind of first application we were looking at in this space is a lot around testing and QAing, because we thought that was kind of, well, this is kind of our origin story, but also we thought that this is where, issues are. So let's say like you run some tests, you have some failures, then what this allows you to do is like, if you remember, there's a graph version of your pipeline, so it allows you to transfer, so you see where the kind of issues come from, and you can have a root cause analysis type finding, right? So these are some applications and some agents, I guess, that we are building on top. We're looking at documentation because that's kind of what people really seem to hate a lot. We're looking at, obviously we have the testing and the QAing kind of element and root cause and so forth. But yeah, now we're also trying to understand like at scale, right? So this is maybe this is a nice to have if you have like 10, 20 lines of code, but we've had clients with a database of like maybe 10,000 or more, building a model, super complex model that just didn't really work, and no one could tell what was in it, right? So this is where the issue kind of really compounds. So yeah, that's us, I guess, and we want to hear. Okay, if I can figure out how to shift my we want to hear, I guess, from the community, what kind of things they see. So whether it's an MCP, are you building your own? Maybe you're not data science agent, but in this case you're not. But if you are, do you want an MCP? Do you want documentation? We're also doing a lot of work to show that basically it's like how should I put it, inference optimization, but obviously for these use cases. So, as a user, you can really get a lot more out of your tokens with it, because you don't need to go back and forth. Like imagine if you can just, find the issue much faster and ask Claude to fix a specific issue. From a workflow point of view, it really helps out, right? And also, I guess, less so from a monetary point of view, but it's a use case we're exploring. So yeah, that's us in a nutshell. But questions and ideas are more than welcome.
As questions, I'll come over to you with a microphone.
No, great question.
Okay, brilliant. Hopefully you can hear. So you mentioned at the start a lot about it being sort of data centric,
Yeah.
but to me it looks like a lot of you just trying to generate the necessary context for it to then, the agent to then code. How do you sort of imagine the space changing? Because I can imagine as teams develop, especially with Copilots, they'll get it to generate that context already. So how do you think your solution sort of sets apart?
Yeah. So this is the trustworthiness bit, right? So I think, so if you think of the paradigm, right? So you have, if you imagine on one side the code and on the other side MLOps, right? Basically like logging in like a real way rather than a code, like LLM-ish way, right? I mean, the outcome might be the same, but no one knows. So we think this is where the differentiator will emerge, right? And if you look at like not traditional, but existing coding assistants, they all have a way to search through code that is to search through what they try to do that is optimized for their use case, right? So what we're saying, if they're not optimized for this use case, right? Because they all have semantic search. They have a lot of different techniques that really work for them, but they don't work. They work, including for this use case, but this use case also needs some additional things because of this data component. So that's what we're saying. I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but.
Thanks for the talk. Very interesting. And I think very novel work you're doing. But it seems like there's two very different domains. There's the code, which is relatively static and it changes all the time. But I suppose what I'm saying is there's one copy of that. And then that code could be used with many data sets over time with very different characteristics. So it's quite ephemeral. And the bit I didn't entirely follow, you had a really interesting slide about connecting the two domains. I didn't really understand how you did that. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So I guess our approach, or our, I guess, proposition is that so we log the artifacts and the code logic in a, shall we say, non-LLM way, which counteracts if you have an agent kind of going off the rails, then that's what is supposed to counteract that issue, right? So we are expecting, so we are kind of not expecting, but hoping that the LLM, like that space, we're expecting it to advance, but that's where we still see a gap because like, they haven't been trained on all the data in the world, like what you're saying about the data changing. It's a lot of different things. And if they get wrong what they produce, and like very small things, they can really get it wrong, right? So if they get that wrong, then the whole kind of edifice just collapses, right? So from engineering point of view, is like a rather small upfront cost, like what we're saying about the semantic search optimization for cursor type coding assistants, right? It's a rather low upfront cost from engineering point of view to develop a framework that's a bit robust, right? To make these things actually not fall over in practice. Yeah, in theory at least, yeah. But at the right now we still we have like a real tool that people that don't use coding assistants can use. It's I think we focus a lot on coding assistants, but it works without it.
Start by saying I think it's very interesting what you're doing, tracking different data elements and the flow, so you can always go back to it and figure out things were created. I was wondering if you were also exploring performance metrics in terms of the way, for example, a data scientist creates a script that is meant to produce a model, and you've got these different steps, and when that's taken to the MLOps engineer, they would often have to reward or write that code to meet certain demands like memory, and within that process, things might change. There might be data leaks. One variable might be missing for some reason. Things could easily change quickly. So is it possible to integrate that into what you've got already for the data science tracking you've got? I'm not sure if that was clear enough.
Yeah, no, so that's great. So we are exploring a use case that's more around, I guess, getting the script to a level that's a little bit more production level, right? So someone can actually pick it up rather than some form of notebook, shenanigans that, everyone hopes for the best, that they do something. So we are exploring that use case, but maybe we can have a chat and then we see exactly what I guess you need. But that's definitely right. I think from an instrumentation point of view, that's an easy one. Right, that's a straightforward one, but also just like bring it to production level. Yep. So we're keen to develop that.
Hi, where do you see the use cases for this particular product which you have developed, from a product market fit? Like, is it compliance? Is the EU regulations which are coming in? Is that where you see the data to prove the trustworthiness of LLMs, the output it generates? Is that where you see?
Yeah, so we're looking a lot at things like model validation, documentation use cases, right? So those are kind of the obvious ones, just because even somewhere people might not be able to use LLMs at all, right? So there's that multiple level of the product, right? So a person just codes on no LLMs, then they code with an LLM, and then they have an agent, and we feel like it kind of can operate at these 3 different layers. So yeah, I would say that's kind of an initial one. We're not, I think we're keen really to work with the data science community and with the data community to bring forth a tool that, they actually want to use, right? So that's kind of, and that's kind of where we see encouraging signs, right? Because I think compliance is often just put on top as a kind of, oh, wow, check this box. And that's not very inspiring to people to, check the box then. Yeah.
Any other questions from audience? Yeah, okay.
Speaking as someone who's like an application support analyst, I might be going into a master's degree apprenticeship in AI and data science. You know that logic tree you showed us? My bachelor's in philosophy. Is that, are the blue and yellow, yes, are they coded, like color coded for code and data being integrated together in a much tighter mesh than normal, or am I completely off?
No, you're right. You're right. We did move to a different visualization because people thought this one was a bit basic. So the existing one is a bit more, is this one that you see. But yeah, one element is the diamond is the code. The date artifact, and then this is basically the function. Right, so if you have a function or operation or some form of, so it's just trying to visualize in a way in which I guess is still intelligible.
Is that sort of redefining the OSI model a bit?
The what model?
Oh, no, like it's probably too basic.
I don't know. To be honest, like we're happy to take suggestions. We've had a lot of suggestions and ideas on this one. We're happy to keep changing it, whatever people like, right? We're just landing on this one at the moment. I don't think it's meant to be like a graph view, right? But just in a way in which people can relate to it, right? So
Sure.
fundamentally, we just look at what's underneath, but happy to.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so I think it's just from our point of view, if I would really appreciate feedback. So install it, try it out, come to us. You have the QR code, hopefully. So yeah.
Great, thank you.